This game took me about 30 to 40 minutes to finish, and yet it left a mark on me like no other game has. The game I'm talking about today is Parry Nightmare. And it sounds less serious than it is. Stick with me, guys. The game is about a girl that we barely know anything about. The only time we learn about her is when interacting with objects in her room, when she tells us about it. We click on her curtains and she tells us a little story, her fridge, and how she likes to have a healthy diet of meat and vegetables. Here, if we click on the right item in the room, she reveals a connected trauma to said item. Trauma is the main enemy in this game, and we will find it in her nightmares. In this nightmare, we're accompanied by a character named Hanu, who is our soul guide, so to speak. We don't know who she is, and she isn't us. She isn't the player's character, yet she's also never mentioned by her at any point. The only interaction between our character and Hanu is at the very start when she introduces herself to us. She talks to us in our nightmares, but outside of them, she doesn't really exist. She seems to speak more to us as a player than to the actual protagonist of the game. The gameplay is very simple. We play the soul, and we parry incoming trauma enemies once they get too close, and Hanu will finish them for us. Every time we parry an enemy, we charge our motivation up, and at full motivation we can unleash one big AoE attack that beats basically every enemy around us, and is the only way to deal boss damage. On top of that, there is one specific type of enemy that will ignore us, the soul, and instead try to hit Hanu, who follows us around doing the entire level. These enemies will have to parry before they hit her, or else they will knock her out. If they do get to Hanu, she will either be knocked out or lose one of her upgrades, which I will bring up in a minute. If Hanu gets knocked, we'll have to get to her and stay on top of her for about 3 seconds to revive her. During the level, there may appear packages that glow golden when parried, and we get to choose one out of 2 upgrades, which will usually change Hanu's form. This can either be an energy drink, vegetables, meat, or sushi. You can see each of them here as they have very unique ways of changing her, and I don't want to get too deep into explaining it. If we as a soul get hit, we get demotivated. If we lose all motivation, we essentially just don't wake up. So this is where we would fail the game. We start every level in a very dimly lit environment swarmed by enemies, and we have to beat them to collect light. The more we beat, the more our light will increase and the room will light up so we can see more, and our FOV will gradually increase. So we try to beat all the trauma in our nightmares and manage to wake up, overcome it for the night, live another day. The game completely plays out in a single night, accompanied by 4 unique nightmares, all tied into a trauma of our protagonist. The first nightmare, just a nightmare. This is a non-specific nightmare that just works as a tutorial to introduce you to Hanu and the mechanics of the game. Here you fight off enemies that look like various body parts, but they don't show any specific kind of trauma. It could be a sign for insecurity about one's looks and one's body, but the game doesn't specifically disclose this as we just start right into it. The arena that we fight in seems to symbolize the inside of a human body. You can see things like a heart, a worm with teeth, veins, and bloody fleshy clumps all over the place that strongly imply the inside of a human body. The work nightmare. This nightmare symbolizes the anxiety, stress, and fear connected to our character's work life. We're introduced to this nightmare by clicking on the protagonist's bag, which then tells us about her not wanting to go to work the next day. Inside the stream, we fight off enemies resembling partially humanoid creatures that seem to symbolize authority figures such as our boss, but also enemies that look like stacks of paper, and at the second stage, some of that looks like pop-ups on our computer. These pop-ups will then shoot little projectiles that seem to be the X buttons that you click to X out of a program or something. Here we encounter our first boss enemy, a huge brain with an eye that slowly follows us and deals massive damage if we fail to get away from it in time. This boss probably stands for the strain the work causes us, how it overloads our brain, it forces information onto us, and we have to work with it for hours with no end. New paperwork every minute, and it strains us. When spawning, we hear telephone ringing until the brain spawns, which could indicate that this might also stand for the stress of dealing either with customer service or with our boss calling us regularly for new tasks. This is further implied by the enemies that spawn in the third stage, which are missile-like enemies that look like phones with mouths screaming at us. These spawn alongside printer monsters with teeth, having freshly printed paper hanging out of their mouth. The arena of this nightmare has elements of a city, with buildings that have mouths or eyes, or even a brain growing out of it, and street flooring. But on the edges, you can see big people resembling big names of our society, accompanied by many small workers all around them, or even in their heads. As in, the workers work for the big corruptors. In one corner, you can even see one big mouth, with people falling into it, being devoured by the greed of the big ones and the company. The school nightmare. This nightmare is pretty on the nose, so we've all been there. We all know school can be one of the worst places and times of our life. In this nightmare, we learn that our character never liked going to school and was not really part of the people there. From the details in the dream, we can assume that she was likely bullied. Here the enemies look like children, with big grins on their face, a big laughing face and their hands lifted up into the air. These enemies are significantly faster and the level is more stressful. These enemies eventually are accompanied by a dislike symbol, and now some of the students will hold up their smartphones. Now the missile enemies are actually shoes, which heavily imply physical, probably from other classmates. The boss enemies for this stage are schoolgirls that move around in the arena very fast and can be up to 4 at the same time. These usually have distorted faces and multiple limbs. Alongside the boss spawn even more smaller enemies now, but these seem to be headless yet have a one big hand, again playing into the implication of physical of the protagonist. The last enemy to be introduced seems like a sports teacher, his head being a big whistle and him carrying a wooden sword with him. The dream's arena heavily resembles the mental image of a school. The floor being cracked and full of footprints. In the surroundings, you can see students being forced to learn things, arms even growing out of their mouths and hands. Phones and people everywhere looking from all angles, resembling the pressure put on these young students. At the bottom, you can see a desk with multiple hands scribbling onto it, drawing and breaking their pens. The childhood nightmare. This nightmare plays into a specific trauma with the protagonist and her mother. In multiple dialogues, she has previously mentioned her mother, the gifts she's gotten from her, a picture on the nightstand, but also how pressured she feels by her. The way she feels forced to be a specific type of person now that she's grown up and has a good job. When interacting with the right object, she talks about playing games on a little handheld when she was younger with just a nightlight on. Once her mother caught her and she broke the console out of anger. Since then, she perceives her mom as this entity that takes everything away she cares about. In this nightmare, the first obvious thing you'll notice is that the boss enemy is instantly there. A big woman with multiple arms and legs, hair covering her face, her clothes dirty, and she's holding various objects, a broom, a pan, a toothbrush, and a trash bag. Once she charges her attack, in between her hair, she reveals one big eye before charging at you. This attack will instantly set your motivation to 0, which makes you die within the next hit. This charge attack will only become faster, and she will even charge it multiple times in a row the further you progress through the level. Her other attack will summon the enemy type that knocks out Hanu. 3 of them will spawn, and all will attack her at the same time. This boss can only be hit while she is attacking you herself. The normal enemies in this game resemble plushies, different ones but all damaged in some way, ripped apart or missing limbs. But the next stage of enemies seem to be sheets of paper from what I can tell that could maybe resemble a failed test or maybe just a scribbled drawing by a child. We then have a toilet with teeth and one big eye, a carton stuffed with toys that could imply her mother having taken them away and throwing them out, and the missiles on this level resemble toothbrushes. Also, there seem to be little traffic lights that turn green when you actually parry them, which I thought is actually a very cute detail. The arena of this level is by far the strangest one. It is filled with monsters of various types, all familiar with what we feared as a child. Stuffed animals with scary faces, corrupted faces or sharp teeth, clowns, puppets, skeletons, doors even, with monsters hiding behind it, barely out of sight. I could honestly talk for hours about how detailed this level is, but for the sake of all of us, I'll just let you see for yourself. The worst nightmare. This is the final level of the game. This is not another unique level though, and more so an ending to our long night. Before entering the dream, we see our room one last time, but now all the nightmares have corrupted it. Fear has taken over how we perceive our own room. It's all gray, our windows boarded up and eyes watching through. Everything is dirty and broken down, stripped of any life and hope. The plants are dead, our walls full of notes with things we've long forgotten. Here we enter the worst of our nightmares, but we end up really just fighting enemies that don't really attack us. The level is not here for another gameplay part. This is simply a message. Children's vision of the world is pretty different from what adults see. Children see a world of monsters and magic, and through this, they experience a primitive kind of trauma. The child's mother comes to their room and turns on the lights to show there is no monster. She gets angry and tells the child to sleep, but the child knows the monster was in the room until just a moment ago, and it could still be there. Depending on how the mother handles it, the fact that the monster was there doesn't change. The monster hides when the mother appears, or is only visible when the child is alone. Either way, the monster is there. As the child grows up, their understanding of the world shifts, and they learn the skills to hide this primitive trauma. There's no knowing when it will appear in a nightmare, but when it does, they will see what trauma lies at the foundation of their actions and behaviors. People complain about how unpleasant it is to carry their trauma, and yet, even still, they cling to it and don't let go. No matter the trauma or nightmare, you'll forget it by the morning. Isn't that how it's always been? Thank you for watching.